Hey, what's up everybody? The Pond Professor here. I am coming to you from my office today, and you know what that means. It is time for a new design, and we have a really cool project in store for us here today. I met with this customer almost a year ago now, and this is out in Ohio. What they have is a beautiful, and I mean a perfect slope for doing a waterfall. We have a nice grade change coming down, and it's actually facing towards the home, which we definitely don't see too much of here in the Chicagoland area. This slope is probably 15 or more feet in elevation change from top to bottom. We're not going to be starting all the way at the very bottom, and we're not going to be pushing the water all the way to the very top, so we should probably be in that 12-foot range for total waterfall height. So I'm going to show you what we're going to be doing here. So here's the actual property that we are looking at. As you can see, got a nice wooded area behind him, and then the foreground has been stripped away. So he had some trees, he had brush and that type of stuff there. Originally what he did was he came through, clear cut all that stuff out because he knew he wanted a waterfall. That gave us a clean slate to start working with. Also be able to put in lots of plantings and things like that once we're completed. But this makes our job a lot easier because now we have this clean open area. We could bring in heavy equipment, skid steers, mini excavators, staging all the stone, as well as the team that it's going to take to pull this thing off. So here's what we have right now. So we can see we have an existing retaining wall. This is actually a drainage area here. Because this area of Ohio, lots of little hills and creeks and things like that, we have to be able to make sure that we're handling all the stormwater, and there's a large section of land upstream of him, so we can't just block that stuff off. So we have to allow that nice flow of water, which is going to be going in this direction over here. So what we did was we have that wall and all that stuff in place. He left a section of the wall out, and that's because we're going to be starting our waterfall kind of somewhere in this area over in here. So that's going to be our reservoir. I'm looking at a 3,000 gallon reservoir, and that's going to give us enough water to supply all that water in motion, as well as have a surplus of water down in the reservoir. So this is going to allow us to turn the pumps off and on throughout the operation of the system. So we can kind of fine tune the water flow, as well as make the life a lot easier for the consumer if he decides to leave town. If he wants to lower his maintenance, he could very easily shut off all the pumps. All the water is going to be stored down in the reservoir. Then when he turns the pumps back on, it's going to send all the water up to the river system, and then it's going to kind of repopulate and refill all that water that's in transit or the water in motion throughout the entire stream system. So as you can see here, we have that nice clean slate to work with. So this is going to give us a lot of different options. And I'm going to show you the design that I came up with here, which I think is actually going to be really cool here. Down here at the bottom, this is where that reservoir is going to be. Then we're going to be pumping water all the way up to the top. I actually have the pumps and piping on this side. We may end up moving that over here just to make it easier to bring the water up in this direction. And the reason I'm thinking that at this point, as I look at it, our access is kind of coming in from this direction. So that means we're going to be setting up our excavator in this area to set all of these stones. So I want to get that piping and all that stuff in place, and I don't want to destroy it. I can't wait until the very end to install the piping. It's going to kind of have to go in on the earlier side. So this way I'm going to be able to install the pipe and work my way out backwards across everything, and I think it might work out a little bit better. The other thing that I'm thinking of doing here, and I do this quite a bit, is we're going to have multiple pumps on this project. So I'm going to send a couple pumps all the way to the top, and then I'm going to send other water into key areas throughout it. And what that's going to do is it's going to give the illusion that the system is bigger. And I'll show you some of these pictures of what I'm talking about. So if you were to go into nature, you're not going to find a massive waterfall at the top of a mountain. You would find small streams and rivulets that come together to form a larger stream, and as you go further and further down the hillside, more and more water gets added into the stream system, and the waterfalls get larger and larger. So the bigger waterfalls, Niagara Falls and things like that, are actually kind of lower in elevation. They're getting close to the final drop where they go down into the ocean or a large lake system or something like that. So that's exactly what we want to do here. Remember, I always talk about biomimicry concepts. We are taking nature as the model, we're going to re-engineer it, and we're going to learn from some of that stuff, and we're going to try to utilize some of those concepts right here in our designs. So what I mean by that is we're going to take some of the water all the way to the top, and then we're going to discharge other key points throughout the system. The other thing that's actually happening here is when we have a pump system, water is pretty heavy. So when we start pumping the water very far or very high, it actually has a lot of weight inside of the piping system, and it puts pressure on the pump. This is known as the total dynamic head. So the total dynamic head is going to impact the overall flow of the pump system. If I were to take the exact same pump for this design, I'll use our Aquascape 5000 and 9000 SLD solids handling pump, and if I were to put it in this application, and if I were to connect it up to this far pipe system, and that water is going 100 feet in length, and it's going a full 12 feet high, I'm not getting the full flow from that pump. In fact, I'm probably going to be down around that lower range. I'm going to be 4,000, maybe 4,500 gallons, but it's going to be significantly less than that 9,000 maximum flow. So now if I start taking that same exact pump, and instead of going 100 feet, I go 50 feet. And instead of going 12 feet high, I'm going to go halfway. I'm going to go 6 feet high. So now instead of getting 4,500 gallons per hour, I'm going to probably get 6,000 or maybe up to 7,000 gallons of water per hour for the same pump. Significantly more volume. So what I like about that concept is it's going to give me a more robust water flow down lower. It's going to create more of that white water action that we're actually looking for, and actually what the customer is looking for as well. There's a few different things that we have to think about here. So pumping is always one of them. The bigger the system, the more critical that actually becomes. So I'm thinking we're gonna have 4 pumps here. This is gonna give us a lot of different possibilities. We could run one of them, and we could just literally run this lower section here if the customer desires. And that way he could still have the sight and sound of water, but he doesn't have a high electrical cost, and he doesn't have a lot of the maintenance. So this is going to allow us just to run one section of the waterfall, just that lower section. And that's going to give us a lot of flexibility and design options for the customer. So we could run 1 pump, 2 pumps, 3, or possibly all 4 of those pumps for this actual design.
1, 2, 3, 4.
The other thing that I'm thinking of from a design concept, so where I'm taking this picture from is a terrace that's right outside of the master bedroom. So I want to make sure that we have a really good line of sight going towards this main waterfall area. But over this section, you see this other deck over here, this connects up to the kitchen and the family room and everything like that. So I want to have a whole nother set of waterfalls that are going to be highly visible from that upper section. So I'm always thinking of these different viewing lanes whenever I'm designing things, which comes back into play over here on our drawing. These waterfalls over here are going to be visible from more of the family room and the kitchen. You're still going to get a glimpse of these, but it's going to be a much harsher angle that you're going to be looking at. So I want to make sure I have some of those other main waterfalls right smack in front of you. And what I love about this is it's going to pull you down from the deck space. It's going to make you want to explore. So this is why I'm thinking of having stepping stones and pathways, maybe put in a bridge of some sort, seating areas. So we want to have lots of interaction. I'm not going to be installing all that stuff. That would have to be installed afterwards by the landscape contractor, because what we want to do is we really just want to focus on the water feature, let the customer live with it for a short time. That way they can see how they're actually utilizing it, and then we could start layering on the rest of the hardscape, and then start putting in all the strategic plantings where we're not actually blocking the design, but we're actually enhancing it. You could also see we have lots of these, what we call wing walls coming out. The reason I have a lot of these things on this particular project, remember, we have this big slope coming down. We want to set a series of terraces where we actually have waterfalls, and we want to have flat areas adjacent to those waterfalls, mimic some of that naturalistic type of a look, but these flat areas are going to be a lot easier for the appropriate planting areas that are going to be in and around it, and it's also going to cut back on erosion. So whenever you have a big open slope, especially if just bare soil like we just showed you, when we have a heavy rain event, it's going to erode away a lot of that. But when you put a series of terraces and flat areas, it forces the water to slow down, it seeps in a little bit, and then it overflows the rock work, and then it's going to kind of seep in again, and it's going to slowly work its way down that hillside, cause a lot less damage over time, and it's also going to look a lot better in the long run. If you were to have all of this stonework, and we're talking several hundred tons of rock on this particular project, just as a band going right down the middle, it's going to look forced and it's going to look fake. So what we want to do is we want to come in with these little wing walls. We want to have stonework on the left and right side of those waterfalls, as well as some random outcroppings and things like that mixed in along the hillside, and it appears that the water has carved its way through all of the bedrock and the soft sediments, which exposes all of that stonework underneath. Make the viewer think that this is a natural water feature, like a spring is kind of bubbling up on the side of the property, and it just has eroded its way through, and it's connecting up with that larger river system down at the bottom of the hillside. The other thing that I put in here, which I think is kind of an important piece, I want to have kind of an island area, and this can be a planted island. It's going to be right in the middle. What this is going to do, it's going to split the waterfall into two separate sections. It's going to give the appearance of a much wider waterfall at the very, very bottom, and it's going to look and it's going to feel a lot better when we look at the overall design. I want to make it look like it gets wider and wider and wider as it gets further downstream, and it takes up more of that hillside. It's going to give much more of that visual impact that we're all looking for in this particular project. We've actually layered in a lot of different project designs just for inspiration for the customer to look at, and the reason we do that is when you were to look at this simple drawing that I have here, very, very difficult to see what this is actually going to look like unless you're a water feature designer and builder. So what I want to do is I want to put in some more things that would be representative of actually what we're going to be building here, and that's the reason why I put in all those different pictures. So I start out with that blank slate. This is just like the customer's house that we're currently looking at, and then we can transform that very easily into this beautiful cascading waterfall system, and this utilized the exact same concepts that I just described. You could see I have a series of small little streams and rivulets coming together, and the system gets wider and wider as it comes lower and lower down through the system. We did the exact same concept. We have a pumping system, and we are discharging water into multiple locations, giving us the illusion that this is a more natural and a bigger type of a system. This one is just outside of Chicago, and again, just that big grassy slope that we're starting out with. And you could actually see here the aqua blocks that are actually laid out in the appropriate position, kind of cascade down that hillside, and then it turns into something like this. This is a much closer shot. Those aqua blocks and everything are kind of right down in this section over here. And here's all those different waterfalls employing that same concept, wider and wider falls as we get further down slope. The other thing that I'm showing on with these is the different types of stone. This particular rock is Missouri weathered limestone, which is, I think, going to be the stone that we're going to be using on this particular project in Ohio. This is another picture of the limestone. This is part of a 250-foot long river system that's actually pumping water out of a natural earthen bottom pond. This was a lot of fun to work with. I love creating all these different effects, big tall waterfalls, wide ones, mixing all that stuff up. Another one down in North Carolina, down south, Richard Petty, NASCAR legend, an incredible feature, 300 feet long, 30 feet tall. And the reason I'm showing these, the same exact concept. We are taking water and we're discharging it into strategic areas all the way throughout the entire system, so we get more and more water flow, and you can see these waterfalls just get wider and wider and wider as they come down lower and lower throughout the watershed. This is a project that we did for the Mahomet Park District down in central Illinois. Lots of action, lots of different layers and ledges and tall falls, medium falls, working with logs and stuff like that. This is over at Omaha Zoo. You can see narrow falls up here, and then this is about 10 foot wide. So these are commercial scale type waterfalls. Shaquille O'Neal, another incredible project. Love working for SHAQ. Actually, right now we are designing, which you're gonna have to stay tuned for, a brand new one for SHAQ as we speak, which is actually gonna have a tee off and then a putting green over here where he's gonna hit over the water feature. I don't want to talk too much about that one, but stay tuned because that is gonna be another incredible project. And then one of my favorite projects ever is this project down in Columbia. This is right after we finished finished it, it has since grown in much more. This is showing a good representation of all that stonework and these wing walls kind of coming out in all directions. And that's because we have our big rocky steep slope. We have to stabilize it and we have to make it look in scale. Once this is filled in, you could barely see some of that rock work now. I love designing, I love speaking about it, but I also love sharing some of my thoughts with all of you. So I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know what you need more of, what you need less of, how we can make this entire experience better. I want to make sure everybody's walking away with something interesting, something new that you learned from all this stuff. That's why they call me the Pond Professor. So I hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you soon in Ohio because this is going to be one incredible project.